Jeremy Clarkson does not usually get good news from West Oxfordshire District Council. So when word came through that the council had actually granted him something, a lot of people did a double take. The pub at the centre of this is the Farmer's Dog, the old windmill pub in Asthall that Clarkson bought for a reported £1 million and reopened in August 2024, right on the A40 by the Asthall Barrow roundabout. It's done well enough, in fact, that the parking situation turned into its own saga. Clarkson rented a neighbouring field to use as overflow parking. Problem is, that field sits close to the Asthall Barrow, an ancient burial mound reportedly around 1,400 years old, and using farmland next to a scheduled monument without permission is the kind of thing that gets a council's attention fast. So Clarkson applied for retrospective planning permission, asking for the go-ahead after the fact, rather than before. He also had 1-inch thick aluminium sheeting laid down over roughly 10,000 square feet of the field, according to GB News, apparently to protect the ground and whatever archaeology might be underneath it. This wasn't happening in a vacuum. Anyone who's followed Diddley Squat Farm knows this council and Clarkson have a track record. Back in 2023, a planning inspector approved an extension to the farm shop car park but rejected the restaurant plans on appeal. The restaurant itself had opened through what the council reportedly called a delightful little loophole, which brought enforcement action before Clarkson pushed the appeal. Diddley Squat sits inside the Cotswold area of outstanding natural beauty, and that designation has been at the centre of the council's objections more than once. So the pattern going in was some approvals, some rejections, and a fair amount of friction in between. Which is what makes this overflow car park decision worth pausing on. According to reporting that traces back to the Sun and got picked up by outlets including GB News and Metro, permission was granted for the field to be used as parking all the way up until December 31, 2029. That's not a token, temporary fix. That's years. The scale of what's supposedly being permitted is worth sitting with for a second. The field itself is reported at 6 acres, with room for up to 360 vehicles. And running that operation isn't cheap. GB News reports, again citing the Sun, that the pub spends around £27,000 a month on parking provision and traffic marshals alone, on top of £100 a day for generator fuel and £400 a week just to keep the terrace heaters going. Put those numbers next to each other and you start to see why the parking situation became something Clarkson needed sorted rather than something he could keep running informally. Historic England, the body you'd expect to be most cautious about a burial mound getting hemmed in by cars, reportedly weighed in too. Their comment on the application was that it represented a positive step in finalising discussions around parking for the pub. That's a notably calm response given what was at stake, and it's one of the few voices in this whole story that comes across as actively supportive rather than just tolerant. Clarkson's own planning team put out a statement defending the arrangement, saying the pub started trading just over a year ago and has proven to be very popular. There is parking on site, but in order to deal with the level of demand, alternative arrangements were made to ensure the safe movement of vehicles and people to and from the site. Reasonable enough framing. Popularity as a problem is the kind of problem most business owners would take. Now here's where it's worth slowing down instead of just accepting the neat version of this story. Is this actually a council softening its stance toward Clarkson, or is it just this specific application landing on its own merits, unrelated to anything that came before? Nothing in what's been reported says the council changed its approach because of who Clarkson is, or because of the earlier disputes. It's tempting to read a pattern into it: car park rejected here, car park approved there, restaurant blocked, parking allowed, but that's a coincidence you could just as easily explain by saying different applications get judged on different facts. It's hard not to wonder whether the Historic England comment smoothed things along more than any shift in the council's general attitude did. That's speculation, not something anyone's actually said on the record. And there's a genuinely small, almost funny thread buried in all this: the aluminium sheeting. 1 inch thick, laid across 10,000 square feet of farmland, presumably so cars don't churn up a 1,400-year-old burial site. There's something almost absurd about picturing that field, ancient Barrow on one side, rows of parked cars on aluminium sheeting on the other, all a few hundred feet from a roundabout on the A40. It's the kind of detail that would sound made up in a sitcom about a celebrity farmer running a pub, except it's apparently just what happened. Not everything about this win is tidy, either. Metro reports, and this one hasn't been picked up or confirmed anywhere else, that a woman took legal action after slipping on that same aluminium surface, describing it as razor sharp. Whether that case is still active, was settled, or even formally went to court isn't clear from anything available. It's a loose end sitting right next to the good news, and nobody's tied it off yet. There's also the matter of the neighbours. A Whitford resident named Mark Leslie raised safety concerns in planning submissions back in February, describing vehicles queuing in both directions on the B4047 waiting to turn into the field, and calling the access point poorly sited on a blind inclined bend where sudden braking and overtaking cause regular congestion. That's not a minor gripe, that's someone describing an active traffic hazard on a public road. Whether that concern got addressed as part of the permission being granted, or whether it's just been absorbed into the decision without a direct answer, isn't something the reporting spells out. So what actually happened here? On paper, Clarkson got the outcome he wanted: 5 more years of legal parking, a supportive nod from Historic England, and language from his own team framing it as a simple response to popularity rather than anything more complicated. That's the version that reads as a win nobody saw coming, especially given how the diddly squat disputes played out. But a decision like this rarely arrives with every question closed. Nobody's confirmed whether the 2029 permission comes with conditions attached: drainage, lighting, hours of operation, beyond a passing mention of a detailed water drainage scheme still apparently needed. Nobody said whether Mark Leslie and other Whitford residents still object now that the permission's through, or whether their concerns were factored into the decision at all. And the exact process behind the approval, a planning officer's call, a full committee vote, another appeal to the planning inspectorate, hasn't been laid out anywhere. Which leaves the real question hanging: did the council actually resolve the thing that was bothering the neighbours, or did it just grant the permission and leave that argument for later? Because if that road access problem on the B4047 is still there, this win might not be as finished as it looks. That's the story as it stands. If the drainage conditions or the resident pushback surface anything new, that's a follow-up for another day. This one's Jeremy Clarkson's parking lot, half aluminium, half unanswered.